Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, and as you know now, because we are in our 34th year, I talk to writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished, what they're planning for the future. It's a wider net than just writers, however. We have had on painters, we've had on musicians, we've had on actors, and occasionally a sculptor. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block is a result of cable access television. It's a wonderful community access artistic invention. Very important, valuable, and that means you have to stick with cable. Stick with the Writer's Block. Now, I'm very happy to say we do have a sculptor this evening, a nationally renowned sculptor by the name of Morgan Faulds Pike. You know that name because she designed and created the Fisherman's Wives statue, which now resides on the boulevard and looks out towards the outer harbor. We're going to talk today about her work and specifically, for some time, about that creation. Welcome to the Writer's Block, Morgan.
Thank you, John. It's really nice to be here.
It's nice to talk to somebody who created such a beautiful piece of art.
Thank you.
Everybody drives by and looks at it constantly. I'm curious, and I'm sure our audience is, where you're from.
Well, I mostly grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, Joe Biden's hometown. My school, my prep school, was a few doors down from his house, actually, on Barley Mill Road.
What school was that?
The Tatnall School. The Tatnall School. Tatnall.
Tassel School.
Tatnall, N-A-L-L.
Tatnall, of course, Tatnall.
Yeah. A day prep school. It was a really good education. So,
and then where did you go after Tatnall?
So then I went to the School of Fine Arts at Boston University, where I majored in.
So you migrated north.
Yeah, I wanted to be in Boston. I just knew I wanted to be in Boston, although I did apply to a few other places.
Why did you have that attraction for Boston?
It just seemed like the most civilized city I knew of. And I had a few friends who had gone to Boston before me, and I had visited. And
you came and studied fine arts.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a teacher in Delaware who pushed you towards the arts and specifically towards sculpture?
I had good art teachers at school, but I also had a good art history background at school. Unusually for a high school, we had a couple of good years of art history. But I really have to credit both my mom and dad with getting me so interested in art. Because my mother was an artist, not a professional artist. She made anything and everything. She painted, she made rugs, she built furniture, she carved things in wood. She whatever she thought of that she might want to make, she learned how to do it and did it. And my father was a professional mechanical engineer, but he also was a cabinet maker, furniture builder, and home renovator on the side. So he was a very creative person too.
So you grew up with a lot of the tools of sculpture and wood fashioning around you in the house.
Yes, people were always making things when I was growing up, and you sort of felt as though you should be too in their presence. Everybody had a project all the time. So
we got you to Boston. How did you find Gloucester?
Gloucester was where I escaped on the weekends to Gloucester or Rockport. When I was at school, I would come out on the train, get off in Rockport, and walk out to Halibut Point, spend the day out there. And
that's a good walk.
Yeah, it's a good walk. And I got to the point where I felt like the city was just too complicated and time-consuming for survival. And I decided to get out of the city, and then subsequently I got a job at C.B. Fisk Organ Builders as an apprentice organ builder.
Fisk Organ in my neck of the woods in Magnolia.
Right, that's right, in Magnolia.
So you got a job there before you moved up, or
no? It was just a little bit after I moved up. Actually, I did some odd jobs before I got the job at Fisk, and then just coincidentally, a friend of mine had worked there a long time ago, and he recommended that I call because I needed work. And I talked to Charlie Fisk, and we talked for 45 minutes on the phone. He was a wonderful conversationalist and a charming man. And he said, well, come in and we'll give you a tryout. So I did.
And when did you start there?
1975 in the fall.
And so you moved to Gloucester in 75?
I actually lived in Newburyport for a couple of years and commuted to the shop, and then eventually moved to Cape Ann. yeah,
Good.
Rockport and then
Well,
Gloucester. Yeah.
we got here about the same time, early 70s.
Yes, yes.
You mentioned Fisk, Oregon, and that's a good segue to one of the first images that you brought for us to discuss. It's a picture of an organ that you designed, and I think helped with or did completely the woodwork on.
Well, I did not design the case of the
Okay.
organ.
This is the first image, the organ from Fisk, or an organ from Fisk. Can you describe that for us?
Sure. It's C.B. Fisk Opus 87, and it's at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor in the one of the small concert halls at the music school. And it's in the style of an instrument from North Germany that would have played the music of Bach and earlier composers. But it's also an eclectic stop list that can pretty much handle any kind of any time period of music. And the case was designed by people at Fisk, and I designed the carvings in the style of the builders that we studied in Germany.
Participate in the actual carving?
Oh yes, I did all the carving.
All the carving,
yes,
all the carving.
Yeah,
So you didn't just design it, you created.
Yes.
I should mention for our audience that Fisk, Oregon, based in Magnolia in the industrial park, creates organs and sends them, and then fashions them there, and then breaks them into parts and ships them all over the world.
That's right. Yeah.
And they have wonderful open houses occasionally.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. It's like the best combination of a medieval atelier where you learn only from watching someone else do what you're learning.
Yes.
And a very modern production plant. It has 25 people working there now, and most people know how to do most everything there. And most people are kind of overqualified for the work they do. There are musicians, there are doctors of music, there are all kinds of interesting people there doing all kinds of interesting things besides organ
one of those
building.
interesting people is Greg Bover, who's been on the show. He's also been a producer of programs here.
Oh, really? I didn't know Greg did.
Yeah. I think I've got that right. He did do the news programming for a bit.
Great. Yeah.
We have a second photograph of an organ. It's actually the picture of an organ that appeared on a magazine whose name I'm not going to remember.
The American Organist.
The American Organist. Can you tell us about that image, please?
This instrument was one of the largest of this kind of job that I have ever done for Fisk. It started out in a private concert hall in Palo Alto, California. And then it was sold to the University of Indiana in Bloomington and slightly modified so that it would fit into the alumni hall there. So it's from 1987, but it's Opus 91 of Fisk, but it was only recently moved to Indiana.
So Fisk product that
moved
to California and migrated back to the Midwest.
Right, where it's being used by lots of people. In the private concert hall, it wasn't being used very much by students.
And what was your role in the production of that?
So this was a 2-year job for the carvings. They're all in American black walnut, and I don't know if it's easy enough to see in the photograph on the screen, but there are 2 life-size figures, a caryatid and atlas figure holding up the underside of the 2 upper towers that I carved from 300-pound blocks of walnut.
300-pound blocks.
Yes,
of course, that's not huge. Something like 2 feet.
The size of a person. Yeah, they're life-size figures from the waist up.
This is your mother and father's influence.
Yeah. That was a really big job. And my brother Tom Faulds assisted me in carving one of those and helping to rough it out. And then he came back later to help sand it. But it was a very exciting job, and the subject matter of all the carvings is not sacred; it's secular. So there are dragons and hawks and mystical animals, mythological animals.
Dragons and hawks. I like that phrase.
Yes.
We have also now an image. The third image we're going to talk about is a reredos. Can you explain what a reredos is?
A reredos is simply a piece that appears in a church behind the altar. And this particular rare dose is a new rare dose was put in 2017 in St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Rockport.
In what year?
2017
Oh,
is when
so
it was dedicated.
brand new
Pretty
work.
much, yes.
Brand new work.
Mhm.
And anybody who wants to see it can go see it in Rockport.
That's right, yes.
Rare dose is not a word that you hear every day,
Yes.
but it's to make the altar appear much more dignified and placed in a place of reverence, so you don't look at bricks or something on the wall behind it.
Mhm. And this has two doors that can be opened in the traditional style of European, actually German. This was the result of a study trip I did in Germany to study the work of a late Gothic, early Renaissance sculptor called Tillmann Riemenschneider, who was really the Michelangelo of the North, but you don't hear about him very much. He's not studied
I won't
in
try
art
to
history.
repeat his name, but I hope our audience can remember that.
Tillmann Riemenschneider.
We also have one more, before we get to the Fisherman's Wives Memorial, Raincatcher. Not the Raincatcher, but not the Raincatcher,
Right.
but simply Raincatcher.
Raincatcher.
That's what kind of memorial is that, and where is it?
It's actually an integral part of a garden that's behind a place called Traditions in Wayland, Massachusetts. Traditions is a place where there are independent single-family homes, there's independent apartments, and then there's assisted living, nursing, rehab, and also a hospice residence, which is contiguous to the garden, the healing garden where Raincatcher is.
It's a nice meditative picture there, I think. Raincatcher.
Yes, Raincatcher is based on Native American sensibilities about the four main qualities of being a human being, and it involves a fountain with a source stone and a circular plan, and it's meant to be a place for meditating.
And that's in Wayland.
It's in Wayland, yes.
So a great deal of your work is available to our audience. They can go to Rockport, they can go to Wayland, or they can go downtown to the boulevard and see one of your pièces de résistance,
Oui.
the Fisherman Wives Memorial, dedicated by the mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives to the Fisherman's Wives. I want to spend the rest of the show on that because it's such a wonderful work. I saw it and walked around it for 20 minutes before I came up for the show today, and it still is very, very powerful. When did you get the idea for that, and when did you get the commission for that?
Well, time-wise, it goes pretty far back. The competition for the job was in 1990, 1991. And the contract was signed subsequently, and I actually built the sculpture in 1999, 2000. It was dedicated in 2001.
Okay, we're looking, by the way, at the first of the three pictures, which is the sculpture from the face, looking from the ocean side. So this has been in the works for now, this is 2023, 24, so for
22 years. We had the 20th anniversary celebration, a little late because of COVID, about a year and a half ago.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm glad to see that she didn't get it, nor the kids. So when did you actually start, and what do you start on? What does a sculptor start on with a project like this?
Well, everything starts with a drawing. And then the next stage is a small maquette, which gives the complete gesture composition of the piece. And that's what was entered into the competition. Showed the concept of how many figures and what they would be doing, basically. But it's not meant to be enlarged to full size. It's only meant to be a concept.
So you didn't have to do a miniature sculpture?
Well, the maquette's about 18 inches high. So once the contract was signed, then the next stage, actually, believe it or not, was to place the boulder on the boulevard. And the reason for that is an engineering problem. Without making a map of the respective heights of the various feet of the figures, there was no way to make a larger version and have it stand properly on an irregular rock surface.
Ah,
And that particular problem, I didn't know for sure if it were really solved until the sculpture was actually installed on the boulder and we knew, oh, phew, the feet fit. I mean, we had to do a little adjusting of the rock.
so the rock that it's on, the boulder, was not smoothed off,
Nope,
and with the top sliced off and polished.
right.
It was simply a boulder and naturally
Yes,
shaped,
that was
and you had to shape to it.
Yes, that was very important to me, and that was part of a negotiation between me and the fishermen's wives, because originally I had thought of a landscape solution without a pedestal. They were more in favor of a pedestal, so out of respect for that, I said, well, how about if we get a beautiful, natural, glacial erratic and have the figures stand on it as though they were just standing somewhere on the shore. And it worked out really beautifully.
So this was a contract through the Fishermen's Wives organization, which I think
right.
is still based on it's a fish pier down here, I think.
Yes, they're still around.
Still there?
Yeah, it's still doing good work.
And well, you were the only artist involved. They were simply citizens who wanted to honor
right.
Fishermen's Wives.
Right,
Not
right.
simply, but
Yes,
dedicated
I
to
worked
that.
directly with them. There was no intermediate person, although there were a lot of other people who worked on this. Yes, yes. For starters, Don Johnson donated the boulder. It's not a quarried stone, but he, up in Johnson's quarry in Rockport, he had lots of glacial stones around, and we spent a lot of time hiking around trying to find one that was
the right boulder.
the right one and also accessible enough to bring a flatbed and a crane up to get it to the site.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's
Moving
about,
around, how many tons did it weigh?
I was just going to say it's about 20 tons, and there's another 20 to 25 tons of reinforced concrete in the ground under it because it has to be really steady.
So they can't shift.
No.
It's like putting a skyscraper in place.
That's right.
They can't.
Yeah, especially so close to the water. So
Yes,
yes.
yes.
So yeah.
Has it shifted at all?
No. No.
It's unbelievable, these storms that come in.
I know.
And the boulevard there is just
Yes.
so...
Yes, although it's worse up by the man at the wheel. The Fisherman's Wives doesn't actually take waves. It just sort of gets spray. Yeah, so far. That's going to change, I'm sure. Yeah. So do you want me to continue with the process?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
I'll try to not make it too lengthy because it's complicated. So the next thing was to build what Walker Hancock, who did give me some advice from time to time on this, very helpful, my good friend, I keep touching my microphone, I'm sorry, was to make the so-called scale model, and that's where I had actual people come in and model for me in my studio. I had four different models, and I actually sculpted them nude to start with to get the anatomy correct. And then Walker taught me to lay cheesecloth over the clay and then model the drapery so that the drapery never accidentally got dug into the anatomy of the figures. And that's a very old-fashioned way of making forms underneath cloth stay round and full. When you're modeling the cloth over them, you might tend to dig in somewhere into the actual, what would be the arm of the figure. So
you had the models came first and just posed by themselves.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And you made drawings or sculptures of them?
I worked from an armature, which is a steel skeleton. It's like the bones inside a person, but it's made of steel and wood. And then I used clay over that with the models working with me in my studio.
And did you say, did the models model with normal day-to-day clothes on first?
No, they didn't. They modeled with nude. It's traditionally for sculptors to model the figure nude, and then I added the drapery.
Did they wonder, how come I got to be nude?
That models are used to that.
These are professional models.
Well, no. Yes, one of them was. The boy was Nina Novello's grandson. The baby was my niece, who was just the right age and size, so she got conscripted.
Who decided that it would be the wife, but she would have children, and there would be two children, and one would be an infant, one would be maybe a 7-year-old boy?
Well, that was something that we kind of came to together. I knew I didn't want to have just a mother and baby. I didn't want to make allusions to a Madonna and child for some reason. I wanted it to be a little more broadly based than that. The same is true of the drapery, the clothing. I wanted it to be very not of a single era or a style, so that it would be good for all time, forward and back. That
works, and they look as if they have come down to the water to look. They're not posed as if they're going to be in a museum corner. They're looking for a ship.
Yes, that's right. They're looking for their boat. And I guess it was I who suggested that it be two children, and the boy kind of helps to animate things a little bit. The mother is more circumspect, and of course the baby is not aware really of what's going on. So you have their three different points of view.
And who's the boy modeled on again?
It was Lena Novella's grandson. I can't think of his name right now. He's a grown man now, of course. He was a lovely kid. Of course, he modeled in his bathing suit.
And the infant was
my niece.
A niece of yours.
Emily Faulds, yes. Yeah. My brother posed with her, holding her.
I'll ask, how you doing, Emily? I'll see if I can get any kind of whisper from that.
Yeah.
So at this point, what's the date? What's the year when you're
that's
at this
about
stage?
halfway through the year 2000, I think, or maybe 1999, somewhere along in there.
So this is still real early.
Yes. So the half size is where you work out all the problems and get everything correct. Then, when you move on to making full size, which most sculptors don't do anymore, they have the foundry do that part. But because it was my first piece of this scale, Walker recommended that I do the full-size clay myself. So I had a full-size armature, 8-foot armature built, and I went back to the stone, made a plaster cast of the top of the stone, so a really accurate replica of the stone, and I put levels into the plaster so that I could be sure that what was level at the site was level in my studio. And then the armature came, and I was allowed by Fisk to use their facility to work on it. They had space, just happened to have some space.
Big ceilings.
Yes, yes. So I built it in one end of the shop, and then as it got more toward finish, I was able to bring it to the front end of the shop and roll it out into the daylight every day, which is a huge privilege to be able to do that. Work under actual daylight and not with artificial light is something sculptors dream of but don't always get to do, because that's where the piece would be eventually, is in natural sunlight.
So when did that roll out from inside Fisk to outside Fisk? What year was that?
Well, that was 2000, yes.
2000?
Yes. And then from there, the wonderful people from Argos Foundry near Peekskill, New York, which is unfortunately no longer in business. Bronze founders are artists themselves. They're what they do is high art, and they are very skilled. They came to Fisk and made what are called rubber molds of the piece. They're flexible molds that are held by more rigid plaster molds. And to do that, they actually kind of cut the piece up. So here you finish this piece.
That's a little scary.
It's very scary. And you turn it over to them, and when they pull all the clay out of the molds for a short time, the piece doesn't exist at all. It's just in a negative shape in the mold. They take the molds off to the foundry, and they pour in wax into these molds. And the secret is that the molds are flexible, so they can be carefully pulled away from the wax positive. This is all in pieces now, and not destroy the wax. And there's an opportunity to work on the wax, which is very soft, and touch up any mistakes or anything that happened.
We have pictures of the front of the statue and from the back of the statue. And there's a third picture of you, I want to show that for the last couple of minutes here, of you on a scaffold working on the sculpture. Mm-hmm. What point were you at when you were doing that work?
Well, that was this particular picture. It was getting toward the finishing, the very outer surfaces and details. Yes, and it gives you an idea of the scale of the piece.
And where were you working there?
That's outside of Fisk, out in their parking lot where I rolled it out. Yes,
at Fisk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful time.
I'm dying to know how the delicate operation of moving the sculpture from Magnolia to the boulevard
Well,
took place?
It actually came from the foundry to the boulevard.
Ah,
So the rubber molds went off to the foundry, they cast it, and then they weld the pieces together with a special alloy of bronze that's the same as the bronze casting. There are a couple of steps in there that I won't get into now. And
where is this foundry?
it was near Peekskill, New York. I forget the actual town. And
So-
Argos, they're wonderful, wonderful. Sort of the C.B. Fisk of bronze founders.
That's the kind of work you don't find people doing
That's right.
all around in
That's
the
right,
neighborhood if they
right.
go to New York.
Yeah. Well, we've had some local foundries here, and hopefully we'll have more again. It's very dangerous work because the bronze is about 1,600 degrees when it's poured. And so one of the problems foundries have is that their insurance costs are really high because of OSHA regulations. And so it makes it difficult.
So did they put it together there in New York?
They welded it together, and I went down and worked on it a little bit, sort of ceremonial, but I did a little grinding here and there on the bronze. And then a patina is applied, which is a voodoo kind of a process where with a very hot blowtorch, the metal's heated and various chemicals are applied that actually changes the color of the metal itself to whatever you want it to be. In my case, I wanted a green, blue, a little bit of brown, sort of variegated, translucent. And then a coat of wax is put over that, and it comes to life again.
And will it stay that color as it's
We
weathered
hope, yes.
over decades?
It gets maintained by the fishermen's wives. It gets a wax wash like your car once a year,
Really?
which keeps it, yeah.
I
pretty much
noticed
keeps
we're almost out of time.
Okay.
And this really went fast. I find that very, very fascinating, how that sculpture came from your idea, your concept of drawings on paper to the wonderful, big, emphatic, and prepossessing work that is down there on the boulevard right now. I want to thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, John. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, and nice to find out about that wonderful piece of art that you created.
Thanks.
I also want to thank our television audience for being with us. If you've learned something about sculpture and the beautiful sculpture down on the boulevard of the Fishermen's Wives Memorial, or the other sculptures that Morgan Faulds Pike has created, then the Writer's Block has done its job by art. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next time on the Writer's Block. Good night.